But you asked me about
yeah.
the last session. There was the shutdown, and then there were some other things that I thought were very untoward, and they're probably examples of what concerned me. One of them in particular was for all of the needs and all of the very serious concerns the legislature was espousing about our debt and the so-called deficit and so on. All of that was so important, and needs about health care and so on, and housing and so on. There's a whole litany of things. Isn't it interesting that as the legislature plugged along during the last year of the 2-year biennium, that all of a sudden in the last few weeks we could just sort of stop everything and decide how we were going to fund a new football stadium downtown Minneapolis for almost $1 billion. That is, I think, shameful. And I think it shows people, and is the reason why a lot of people, with all respect to Vikings football fans, that it shows them how patently thin politics gets sometimes over at the legislature. I'm talking about politics, legislative politics, not partisan politics in general, but just how petty things can get. And I think people see that and they just shake their head and say, well, I guess that's how priorities work over there.
Yeah, well, having the money for a Viking stadium and then running to Washington for education dollars, I just don't understand that.
That's right.
Well, we could talk about that for hours. Let me jump to something. I think jobs and taxing and spending really rank high with a lot of voters this year. I know it ranks high with me and my family and neighbors. The jobs, taxes, which I think are related in a lot of ways. That job-friendly atmosphere. And what are the things that what do you think that the state of Minnesota should do to create more of a job? We're known as a state, whether it's true or not, that is not real friendly to business and high tax, and we can get into how true that is or not. But what do we do to change that and change that image that we have that brings that entrepreneurial spirit here to Minnesota?
I believe the simple answer to that is to examine closely the regulatory environment that we've set up. Not just tax laws, taxes is part of it, but also the regulatory environment that we've tended to adopt in Minnesota over the years. At the time, incrementally, it was all to help the people, protect the people. Protection is a big thing. But in the course of doing that incrementally, I don't think anybody's kept track in a big picture sense what the net effect of that has been. And therefore, when you have a company that wants to come into the state to build, they look at a lot of different things, and not just the tax climate. And they look at the resources, but they also look at how difficult it's going to be to get from scratch, so to speak. Think of a building if you want to. How do they get from that to a completed building where they can occupy it and the machinery and so on can be brought in, and their factory or whatever the process is can get going. And we hear the horror stories all the time that are well documented that in other states it's nowhere near the time frame in Minnesota. And we like to pride ourselves on thinking that, well, it's environmental protection laws and it's the environmental review process and so on, and it takes a long time. Well, time is money. And I don't think the solution is for the state then to throw money, ironically, like a left-hand, right-hand problem, that you got the left hand doing all the regulation and slowing things down, but over here on the right hand you have DEED, the Department of Economic Development, over here getting money and trying to throw it at companies to induce them to come to the state. What's really needed is for the legislature, I think, to hunker down and decide what is it that we really could do to make a better atmosphere. And let me quickly point out, government's job is not to create jobs. Government, if anything, is there to make sure there's a good atmosphere, especially regulatory and taxation, that makes it attractive to the private sector to come to your state. By way of a tongue-in-cheek disclaimer, I am a South Dakota native, and I still have good friends that live in South Dakota, and everybody should take a trip, just a day trip or a 2-day trip, down to Sioux Falls sometime, and just drive down there and, just drive around and see what's going on in Sioux Falls. We hear the radio ads up here in the Twin Cities.
I was going to mention that, especially in western Minnesota,
right.
Every other commercial on the radio is bring your business to Sioux Falls.
Well, and I know South Dakota is still, I don't know if they've hit 1 million total population, and we can laugh at that, that in Hennepin County alone we're 4 times bigger than the whole state of South Dakota. But But if you go to Sioux Falls and other cities, it's not just Sioux Falls, you see that there's a good quality of life there. They got good educational system, they got good infrastructure, and they also are conducive to private sector development and jobs.
They have no income tax. Is that right in South Dakota?
Right. They have some personal taxes, but right.
Oh, okay.
And North Dakota, it's hard to talk about North Dakota in the same vein now because they got the oil production and so on. But even still, North Dakota had the similar environment. It isn't a matter of state envy. I like Minnesota. I like the quality of life here. I understand why people like to come here. I had 13 years as a community development director in the city of Plymouth. And it was in the heyday of a lot of the development that's in Plymouth now was at the time called so-called executive housing, where it was boom times and suburban development was happening. But a lot of the housing there was being occupied, if you will, bought by people that were coming in with the big corporations and so on that were developing in Minnetonka and Plymouth and Bloomington and so on. And they found Plymouth an attractive place to live. Well, you get talking with those folks who now are citizens. And find out what really attracted them to the community, and it was exactly the things that attract all of us to the community. But it wasn't because of government.
Yeah.
They were here because the company made the move to come here, and here they were. And I think that with our rich economy, so to speak, relatively speaking, wealth, I mean that in the broad sense, I think that we've gotten off track. And now we can't make those bragging rights anymore. We are not the top of the line. We are a high-tax state.
Yeah, well, just to piggyback on that, what concerns me is the proposals by the governor to create another income tax bracket, which are really the job creators.
Right.
And then you double the federal taxes on top of those people.
Yep.
You know, there was a time, and I'm 35 years old, but you know, there was a time Honeywell, 3M, Target, Pillsbury, Best Buy, they were the leaders here in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
But now,
They've
you know,
all moved away.
Right. You know, we chase TCF, Twin Cities Federals now in South Dakota, I think.
Yeah, Honeywell is, well, they got acquired, but they're out east. You know, and that's how the corporate world is. But I think
it's a big worry going forward. I have that worry a lot for young people that they're going to come out. Where are they going to leave Minnesota to find a job?
But we've been taxing ourselves very heavily for a lot of things that have been given priorities that I think the legislature needs to stop and evaluate carefully and say, are these really the things that are making for the quality of life that the people want and need? I think a lot of things get established and we just get rolling with them, and we keep going back to the cookie jar and keep going back to the cookie jar or the tooth fairy, whatever mythology you want to bring into it.
I'll take the cookie jar.
Well, and my point is we've got to just put a stop to that. If you don't mind, I've been doing a little research on my own that I was aware of a number of years ago when I was with the tax committee.
Sure, and, I love research.
By the way, well, I won't bore everybody with a lot of statistics, but online you can go to the state auditor's office and our website, and every year cities, all the levels of government, are required to submit information to the state auditor, who by law has to develop a report, and that report is online at the state auditor's website. And it's about lobbying expenses by local government. And I think what I'm going to share with you here will tell you the tale about how we've gotten so screwed up. That's my term.
Yeah.
I'm quoting now, executive summary, and I won't bore people with all the details.
It's okay.
You'll be amazed at the number. And it's not the big number, it's the first number. Local governments spent a total of $8,302,810 on lobbying activities in 2011. That was an increase of $54,817 from the previous year.
Now, when you say local, are you talking League of Minnesota Cities?
I am talking about the cities and the counties
lobbying for state money or something, right?
Lobbying the state legislature for money. The associations are a whole another level, which is also accounted for in the report.
Oh, okay.
And we don't need to get into it. I'm not avoiding the topic. I'm just saying there's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.